pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, everyone. All right, first item on our work session agenda is legislative updates.
I guess I would just start by saying, what questions do you have? Because generally, I think everybody knows nothing's really moving. The legislative session started, the committee deadline is Friday this week, and the session is supposed to end by May 18th of this year. The update that we got from Matt at AMC at our MACA meeting on Friday talked about the divided house, the complexity of the budget, the impact of the February forecast, which was better for this biennium, but not as still not solving the problem in 28, 29. And then we talked a little bit about the number of bills, and I did some AI research on that. We've reached 10,000 bills in a 2-year biennium, and we're seeing 50 to 75 of those coming through as bills enacted. So the vast majority of bills that are introduced for, AI describes it as signaling. So they're often partisan in nature and not really intended to go forward, but most of the restriction that's happening is happening at the committee level. Committees have the power to hear or not hear bills. So that's where most of that is happening. The bills that are in committee are very, to a very great extent, the omnibus and policy and budget bills for all the major budgets. And those are, so even if, and the way that this is working is that we've gotten away from introducing a bill and discussing a bill and a policy and having a conversation and a vote on that. Those things are getting tucked into omnibus bills and by committees and people in positions like that have an opportunity to do that. And that's how those things are passing. So something that doesn't pass on its own standard doesn't mean that it's not going to get tucked into an omnibus bill if it has enough support at some point in time. A couple of the bills that we were concerned about, it sounds like the NDA bill is going to be the odd man out and actually have enough support to come through, which conversation last week at the county administrator meeting was not that NDAs were not legal, but with the data practices, people could always request data on an MDA, right? So there's kind of a mixed bag of people who have experience with that, or whether they're in a situation where people knew that they could do that or not knew that they could do that. There are still Mary's primary concern relative to economic development is that you have to keep some things relatively confidential until the point that they become public anyway, right? And we have the opportunity to do that without drafting and signing NDAs. You know, we're just not going to do that. The actual reason that this bill was introduced to get around the AI and the data centers, because they were the ones requesting that the counties would sign these. So rather than the legislators going after specifically that type of business, they're going after one of the practices, which means it could just affect someone else. The ATV snowmobile on public lands is pretty much dead in the water, but it's not to say that it's not going to be introduced again. And that is one of the issues, one of the situations where we really have to have a conversation, because in the 13, 15 county area, it makes all the sense in the world, because all the public lands are not like our public lands. They're parks. not appropriate places to be running a side-by-side or an ATV or a snowmobile because we don't have trails through them. In the situations where we do have trails or we have county-managed land where people are allowed to use it, it's just a different thing. So any restriction on that would have to be done some other way. But it's just that just ends up having to be a conversation, or as long as it's a one-off bill, it's not gonna end up going anywhere. But yeah, the numbers in the last 20 years, the number of bills being introduced have gone up about 75% annually. Just can't be kept up at that pace.
Jeff, did Matt say anything about the license tab fee bill?
No. No, do we have a number? Do we want to look at that? Or want me to follow up with that?
I'm following, I'm reading about it, and there's a bill introduced to put it back to the pre-2023 levels, because people are getting sticker shock at how much, if you buy a new car in Minnesota, it's gonna be over $3,000 over 5 years. In North Dakota, it was a little over 400, and in South Dakota, it was $387. And so car dealers have actually started receiving calls from people living in Minnesota because they're so upset at how high they're. So I'm already following the bill.
Okay.
I don't know if it'll ever get off the ground this year, but
I'm certainly not condoning this, but people are not
registering it in the
registering
state of
their
Minnesota.
vehicles and just paying driving as long as they can until they get pulled over and paying the fine, because the fine is cheaper.
Hmm.
Which is not a good place to be.
No.
The impacts of the 2025 federal budget bill and existing legislation and proposed legislation from the state of Minnesota are going to create pretty significant impacts for us in '27 and later. Many counties in Minnesota budgeted an extra 1% or 1.5% in 2026 to set aside for human services changes coming in '27 and '28. Estimates for Hubbard County, $2 to $6 million in cost shifts and additional expenses. That's a significant number, and that's primarily coming, about 75% coming from human services and about 25% coming from law enforcement. The drivers in human services are the Medicaid cost shifts that we know where we will have a cost, and where we haven't previously had one. And even though there aren't any Medicaid cuts at the federal level, what they have done is they have reduced the increases scheduled for future years. Well, that just creates the budget crisis at the state level regarding those problems just gets exacerbated. And that's why that's primarily why we have a budget that's not in balance in 28, 29, is because those things have happened. And it's not even budget even with the proposed stuff and the cost shifts to counties.
So it sounds like too in the court case that the federal government won the court case saying they could withhold the funding.
And withholding the funding
So we'll have to see what the state does now.
is not what that's above and beyond what's in the 2025 federal legislation. Behavioral health mandates, the increased eligibility requirements, right? Having to document every 6 months instead of every 12 months. That's going to doubles the amount of time you have, number of hours it takes to process those eligibility requests, because you have to do it twice a year instead of once a year.
So I was thinking, since I became commissioner, how much the staff has grown here.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that the requests were wasted at all,
Mhm.
but our population hasn't grown. It's pretty much stayed the same. And I know we've gotten this report before, but I'd be really interested in the last 10 years, where have the staffing been implemented and how much had to do with unfunded mandates?
And MACA is working on exactly that kind of report
they?
for
Oh,
countywide.
terrific.
I can get the numbers here,
Yeah.
but they're putting together a list of the popular term is unfunded mandates. The truth of the matter is counties are an extension of the state, so everything that we're mandated is a negotiated funding. And if they don't fund it, then we have to fund it, right? I mean, that's how counties exist as an arm of the state.
I will say though, using the term negotiated, they didn't ask us.
No, they didn't, they didn't.
So we haven't negotiated with them.
They negotiated from a different position than counties have been in. But there's always been that. And truth be told, it is challenging. We have this conversation at the city-county manager meeting, and city managers get up and talk about unfunded mandates, and there isn't a single unfunded mandate at the city level. They still like to talk about it because it's,
Sounds good.
but there isn't, because the mandates are all relative to human services and roads and law enforcement, and all of that is county responsibility and not cities, so, we,
So do you have any sense of the bottom line impact on the 27 budget yet? On our budget?
yeah, on our budget,
Assuming we kept all things the same that we're currently doing?
and I think one of the assumptions is that we're not gonna be able to meet certain requirements. The likeliest thing is that we're gonna have to backfill the children's services staff that we would reassign to the adult services to be able to meet the requirements in those programs, or evaluate exactly how thin we can run that, right? That's gonna be a question we're gonna have to consider seriously. The cost shifts are probably gonna be in the tune of $700 to $1.4 million. The additional staffing, if we had to do that, would push that, another $200,000. When you look, I mean, the fastest increasing budget that we have had has been in the law enforcement. It's been outpacing human services budget by a couple of percent a year. So we're at 9 to 10% increasing with law enforcement and 6 to 7% averaging over the last 10 years in human services. Human services fund balance, they don't have any to give. They barely have enough operating to get through May. So whatever program we have to support, we have to offset with levy one way or another. And I had a conversation with Mike about this yesterday, and I said, what are you hearing? Because from what I'm hearing, this looks grim. And that the people who added 1% or 1.5% last year to put that into their fund balance into 2027 meant that what they were doing was mitigating the expense they saw coming in 2027. I know Sherburne County is one of those who did that. They have 800 employees, which means if we've got 80 human service employees and they're 4 times as big as we are, they have 250 human service employees. And they're probably looking at trying to hire 20 to 25. I don't know where they're gonna find 20 to 25 people qualified for those positions when everybody else is also looking, but. So it's a real challenge. I don't know what's coming down the line on that, but.
So what's gonna happen when we can't fill positions? Will it just take that much longer to get the work done?
One of the things I think that they're actually just, if we're not gonna delay it and we're not gonna change the requirements, then the standard that we've been held to is our response time in these case management, and that's the thing we're not gonna be able to meet.
It's gonna be impossible.
It's gonna be impossible to meet that 24 or 48 required response time if we don't have the staff to do it. And that's the most likely thing that's gonna have to give. Now, the other, looking at some of the impacts of the other, not the county impacts, but the local impacts of the 2025 federal bill is that there are gonna be fewer people that are qualified for and on Medicare and Medicaid programs. Well, not fewer people on Medicare, but fewer people on Medicaid. That provides some amount of relief to the county, but it doesn't provide any relief to the county. The problem with that is, it'd be really hard pressed to find if we've got 250 to 400 people who could lose Medicaid benefits by estimates in this county. It'd be really hard to find people that don't need them. And I'm guessing that the vast majority of people on Medicaid payments in this county are kids. So that's gonna trickle down. That's gonna hit all of our local, and the SNAP benefits that do that. It's gonna hit all of our local establishments. It's gonna hit the hospital hard. Predictions for rural hospitals are, again, grim, unless something changes in those forecasts. And I think everybody agrees that there's a lot of the fact that the United States spends more than twice per capita on healthcare than any other country is ridiculous. But
And I think we rank 60th.
in outcomes, yeah. That's because the money's not going into services, or it's not going into services that are affecting people. It's going into profits for all the middlemen along the way.
Profit and fraud.
Yes, there's less at the user level than there is at the CEO level, but if you quantify the dollars. But every time, and so when we take and we say fraud's a problem, when we're gonna redouble our eligibility, I guarantee you the cost of double checking that twice a year versus once a year is not gonna offset the savings that we're gonna get on a case-by-case level. Things just don't change that often in a situation where someone's on nursing home waivers, right? That's just not gonna change. They're after the age of 65, or if they're disabled, their situation isn't gonna change every 6 months because they're in a very stable position where they're living on defined benefit. And that just, the challenge is on the front end when people first qualify for that. And we're working through a couple of cases right now where somebody needed that service, had an asset, transferred the asset to the family, and then they found out that they transferred the asset in a way that means they still have to count that as an asset before they qualify for benefits. So at the same time, we're saying that that there's fraud and people are getting benefits that they shouldn't have, and people are being made, if they sold their house for $250,000, well, they're gonna have to come up with $250,000 cash of services before they're gonna qualify for nursing home waivers. Those are the people that are being affected in rural Minnesota. Those are the people being affected in this county. So it's and you guys see that from the hospital. You know that those kinds of situations where somebody thought they could sell their asset to their kids, and then not have to claim the asset. Well, there's a 5-year look back. You had to have done that a long time ago.
And what is the conversation at Prime West? It's the provider fraud, not so much the people that are eligible for the service. And how the state is approving, like MnDOT is approving transportation, but they don't do any background check, and they don't check out to see if they're legitimate business. They just, as long as they have a license and their vehicle's registered, and they get approved as a transportation driver.
And you're seeing a lot of that on, the evening news and stuff, for some person who's been tried for fraud has got several businesses, several
Even
healthcare.
coming to the same address, and the state's not tying that together. Yeah.
So it's almost like some of that simple, I think it might be simple paperwork to look through that kind of stuff, but I'm sure there's gotta be more to it, because there's probably thousands or tens of thousands, if not more, of these companies that they have to look at.
So thinking ahead to budgeting here, because I don't know how much, if any of this, we can absorb by a levy increase outside of the normal yearly stuff. So we're gonna have to look at, service reduction or elimination in some cases, and
We're gonna have to consider all
look
of
at
that.
staffing, and whether there can be some reduction or reorganizing, we're gonna have to look at all that stuff. And the way it's looking, they probably should be looking at that, start looking at that now. And start identifying some of those things that they potentially and prioritizing. Because we'll be looking at this right away come August.
Yeah, and half of the items that I have held over for the general government meeting, I honestly think I should just add a brief update to at the end of this meeting, so you all hear it, know that they're coming up. Because it starts with the 24 audit, the budget, things to be concerned about. And then, because I think we do have to have just a general idea, better idea going into it this year than we would get in July. We can't wait that long.
Because
Well,
we
and
certainly
even-
can't absorb $1 million
No,
levy
and-
increase.
And even all departments, what can we, we give really good service. But what can we delay and still be within the parameters?
Mhm.
And we'll, obviously in 6 weeks, we'll know more specifically. I mean, we'll be able to quantify that more specifically, but the range of $2 to $6 million impact on Hubbard County is, and the likely impact of $2.5 to $3 million. I can't even figure how we do 6.
Yeah.
But 2.5 to 3 is already a challenge, because cost of living on compensation is 5.5, 5 3/4.
Not good.
Sorry, I've got nothing but good news. I think in the strategic planning one, we're gonna have much better news. But in the legislative and the budget, it's really gonna be a tough year. It's gonna be a tough couple of years.
I also think we gotta be very careful about, making sure the problem stayed where the problem is and not trying to solve the problem from other things that are gonna hamper us later. I don't think that would be very wise. Because eventually this problem's gonna have to work its way out in a short period of time. It will not be able to stay like this without fundamental change coming down from the state.
It won't, because the property
It just-
taxes will be
It
insurmountable.
won't work at this degree
No.
that we think we're facing. And my gut tells me that some things will probably change before the legislative session ends or the end of the year to hopefully make it a little better, but in the meantime, you gotta
I
plan
love
for-
your
plan for the
optimism.
Well, it generally always does, because they're faced with the same reality too. And I think the legislature understands that you just can't pass all this on to the counties without some major changes occurring at the county, and people are gonna get hurt, because services are gonna disappear. And do they want to bear that responsibility? I think people in the public completely understand what's driving it and where it's coming from.
Well, there's a correlation in the number of bills introduced is pushing 6,500, 7,000 in the first year of the biennium and 3,500, 4,000 in the second. Correlates with election years. It doesn't. It has something to do with the policy year versus the bonding year at the legislature as well. But I think it has way more to do with the fact that there's a lot more introductions in the off election year. Right? This year's an election year. They're going to be 3,000 to 35, but last year there were 6,500 introductions. And that's also why it's unlikely that anything significant is going to happen, but there is going to be the same pressure on them that there is on all elected officials, that you can't make this the property owner's problem. And you can't have people going without services that they need to exist.
Ultimately, I still go back to the same thing. We are the people. We vote for who we vote for, and there's consequences for the decisions that are made. And we're gonna react to that, which is going to affect the voters, which are gonna have to decide if this is gonna be their new normal or if they're going to do something different. It's just the way it works. Not fun, though.
So I know that, AMC will have a legislative update, I think probably on Monday next week that people can register for. We have a weekly update with the county administrator group on Fridays. Usually just touch base on the things that moved since the last time. But we'll have to watch those things. I know Mary was concerned about the NDA thing, but the truth of the matter is that I don't know, in almost 5 years, I don't think we've ever signed one. I know that we have had conversations with people that we haven't brought to a public meeting until we were in a position where we could do that. And then a lot of them actually don't get to the point where anything's gonna happen that requires that public meeting. We tell you, there are people who are interested, there are people who are looking for something like this, and we plan for that contingency, but that doesn't always translate into an action. So we operate below the level of the NDA, and truthfully, if we had one and somebody made a data request for it, we'd have to give it to them anyway.
Yeah. And I don't know, this is my perspective, but, when you look back a few legislative sessions ago, and the state budget grew by 42%, it's not a revenue problem. It's a spending problem.
Mhm.
And the state needs to cut. It's just that simple. Now, whether they will or not, I don't know.
Minnesota paid leave, regardless of thoughts on the program, could have been handled by about a 10% increase of staff to the unemployment office, instead of creating a whole new office and building a building to hold them in.
Yeah.
The challenge is that the vast number of things that are being approved these days are not running through the Department of Administration for research and analysis. Even though we're only putting 50 to 75 bills through a year, they're not being vetted very well. So yes, the growth in just the constant building of new buildings in St. Paul to house the staff to perform, the splitting of Department of Health and Human Services into 3 groups. I don't know anybody can see how that's making it more efficient.
And the state wants to take over more. I'm not sure that's.
I think they backed off of transit.
I think they've heard that loud and clear.
And they're putting in pharmacy, so that's encouraging.
So we just have to keep an eye on it, and we have to understand that it is gonna have impact on how we have to organize our staff and,
Do that preliminary work over there in those 2 areas and start putting stuff on paper you thought you'd never have to dream you'd have to put on paper and prioritize. So if we're faced with it, we have a plan.
that's what we're gonna have to do, is we're gonna have to have some potentially hard
Yeah.
hard decisions in mind when we bring plans forward.
And you're gonna have to go a level or 2 harder than you want to go and have it ready just in case you need to. Hopefully not.
The challenge is the requirements to provide services and the amount of compensation we're getting to provide the services are the 2 sides of a vice. It's really challenging. If it were simply just that you got fewer revenues so that you just had fewer staff to provide services, that'd be one thing. But if you don't meet those requirements, you're gonna lose more revenue because they're gonna penalize you for not meeting the standards. And that won't help.
So just crazy thought here.
Mhm.
What if you just didn't do anything? What would happen? Who takes the responsibility? How would that work? Would the state just step in?
I've
That's
answered
crazy.
I've answered that question in a general way when I had a commissioner in another county say, what if we just didn't do this? I'll give you one scenario. If our assessor's office doesn't do their job correctly, the state will come in and they will assess increases to meet the data that they have relative to sales, right? So if our assessor doesn't move property values to the point where they're within that 90 to 105% category based on sales report, the state will step in and just assign that. And they will likely go to the higher end and they'll just slap those values on there.
And it'll be a blanket.
It'll be a
for
blanket, yep.
Everybody.
And if we don't do our job relative to budgeting and levying, they're gonna
Come in and levy for us.
they're gonna come in and levy for us, and they're gonna be heavy-handed in a worse way than they were before. And if we don't have people to provide services, you would think they would contract with somebody else to provide the services, and it's gonna cost us more than doing it ourselves. It's gonna bring a lot of discussions onto the table, you know? Some that are good, like some of the eligibility work, that we have 87 counties that have staff that are doing eligibility work, when all the eligibility information is in one place in St. Paul. Why do 87 counties have doing all the work that they could be doing in one centralized place? The problem is they don't have the capacity or the organization to do that effectively and get that out to us right now. I mean, that's one of the, in addition to the modernization of the software that we're using to provide these services, where certain functions should be happening in the process. And what is Minnesota one of 6 or 9 states that has county-provided human services? The vast majority of states, it's a state-provided service, right?
Yes.
So we wouldn't have those staff.
One thing they could do I mean, I don't understand why they don't do it, but since they eliminated a lot of the eligibility requirements for SNAP and other programs because of COVID, they need to just put those back in place.
I think most of them have snapped back into place, and then the federal cuts to those programs are gonna. I think what's gonna end up happening is that the eligibility will be the same, but the amount will be decreased.
Yeah, which, like you said, probably wouldn't have a huge effect on rural counties, but it could, if they brought back asset testing as an example, it could have a huge impact in the larger metro counties, more so than probably here, which is still part of the state budget.
Well, the fact of the matter is every SNAP dollar that comes into a county gets spent 2 to 3 times. So every SNAP dollar that doesn't come into the county is $2 to $3 that aren't being spent in local resources. That affects.
Still coming from somewhere.
It is.
And that's, I mean, I wouldn't choose to build our economic base on that.
No. It would be cheaper to have a minimum basic income than to have the eligibility required systems that we have, because the administrative cost of these systems is significantly more.
Okay.
And the issue is politically, people can't tolerate the fact if one person gets something they don't think they deserve, which
Which can cause the producers to quit producing.
which is just a challenge, so. But
I would like to add something. Part of the problem is some people don't see the worth of work and what it does psychologically and emotionally to positive self-view.
That's partly because culturally we're changing, and then public policy has created, there's not as much stigma to it as there used to be, and then public policy can enable some of this more. So it's not any one thing, it's a whole cauldron of stuff that's happened over decades to get us to this position. Sometimes I feel like our solutions are just doubling down on the same thing we've been doing, which continues to make the problem worse, because we don't have the stomach or the wherewithal to fundamentally change for fear of being labeled as a mean person or whatever, or not caring or not compassionate. But ultimately, you can make the argument too that you're not being compassionate if you keep enabling.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Work is a life skill,
Yeah, and
and it's a lifelong skill.
Mhm. And I'm not so sure we would be the country we are today if we just had universal income and a vast majority of the people didn't have to work. I think our production would drop substantially, and we wouldn't have the standard of living we have. And 30 years from now, we'd just be stagnant as can be.
And how do you find purpose?
Right.
Truth be told, in a 75-year average, 62 to 63% of the eligible population participated in the workforce. 67 was the high in 1999 to 2000. 58% was the low in 1950s when fewer women were in the workforce. And currently it's at 62%. So we're right at the average and increasing.
The question today, though, is who's counting in that workforce?
Yeah, because the people that are no longer working for jobs are not counted in that. And so it skews the numbers. People that are eligible to work but have no desire, so they've just checked out of the workforce.
Somewhere between 12 and 20 million illegal immigrants residing in the country. Are they counted in those numbers? Are they all a significant portion collecting social service benefits? There's a whole lot more to it than,
So figure 72% of the Somali population that's been here greater than 10 years is still on government assistance.
yeah. And take the number that they eliminated, but they were 17,000 illegal immigrants were getting free healthcare from the state of Minnesota up until recently. You know, add that up. So how much of that is actually happening, you know, it's hard for us to know, but yeah. So
Right,
you
and
really don't
social
know what the
services-
numbers mean sometimes.
And social services has said they have denied services, and then the state comes in and says, no, you have to
You have
give
to give
them.
it, yeah. It's a mess.
Well, anyone who doesn't have services that goes to emergency care at your hospital ends up costing you all money anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's just gonna be a challenging year, and we need to get ahead of it, so that addresses the basic elements of the budget as well as the, whatever we can do relative to legislative.
And we're just gonna have to be tight in other places on the budget then too.
Yeah, it might even mean caring for our roads differently, something we're known for.
So the only issue relative to legislative updates is the request from Clay County to submit a letter of support to our House and Senate representatives relative to their non-secure treatment facility. And I think we've supported this in the past, and if there's general consensus, then I will draft these letters and bring them to the board meeting next week for approval.
I think the big thing on this one was the psychiatric residential treatment, that there isn't one in the area, you know, and it's badly needed. And I think that's where we're seeing these $100,000 bills or more a year for somebody.
When you're paying $2,800 a day to hold somebody at Anoka State Hospital, or whatever it's called now, because they don't meet medical conditions, but they have no place else to go, this is a place for them to go where it's not gonna be $2,800 a day. As a matter of fact, it'd probably be 10-15% of that.
So as I read through this, you know, they're requesting funding.
They are requesting bonding
I didn't look up
funding.
and I didn't look up the bills to read them, but they haven't received any, right?
No,
Okay.
they're moving this down the road. I will provide a summary of the data
Okay.
and a draft of the letters for you to look at next week.
Yeah, we already supported the original thing, which they're remodeling into something else and then wanting to build another facility.
And this will just be a drop in the bucket, but it's a start.
It'll be a drop in the bucket, but it will be a resource available to us.
Oh,
Proximity-wise, they're in St. Cloud and Brainerd are the places where they're big enough to support a facility like this that would be useful to us.
My guess is if they get it and it gets done, it'll be full right away.
yeah.
So we'll still
With
have
a waiting list.
We probably will still have the same problem with placement unless you get lucky and there's an opening and.
But if you can defer one of those cases for 3 months at $2,800 a day, that's,
Yep.
I'm just doing the math, 90 times 3,000, that's a lot. That's $350,000.
Yeah.
So
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I will bring that forward next week.
Yep.
The short version of this is, I copied this forward from last year's update, but the short version is on all the elements except employee development, we have pretty much accomplished our goal, or the goal is no longer relevant. And then in the employee development portion, the personnel committee heard from Mary last week what her plans are to carry some of these forward this year. I'm just going to scroll through. There are a couple things in yellow that I do want to highlight. Oh, we have been trying for 3 years to implement kind of a non-mainstream permitting software down in environmental services. And we're at the point where we're not going to be able to continue to do that. So I told Eric we have to have a process of going through and looking and identifying what our priorities are, what our actual needs are, and and look for a couple of different potential solutions to that. The challenge is this is as big, if not bigger, as thinking about payroll supplier, because if this is permitting and licensing the way they're doing it, it could affect solid waste, it could affect, highway department, anybody that's doing licensing. It could affect all of the alcohol and tobacco licensing that we're doing. Some counties have them all merged into one program. You end up getting a pretty robust program, but if you do a pretty robust program that has a $40,000 or $50,000 annual fee, but takes care of all those services, rather than 4 or 5 $20,000 annual fees that just take care of targeted services. So I've told Eric we really have to have a good hard look at the options for this and make sure we make a good choice, but you need to know that is something that's going to be coming up for review this year.
So Tyler isn't the answer?
Tyler is one answer. I just scheduled a demo with Tyler on May 4th.
And so do they have the potential to do it all?
They do have the potential to do it all. They have permitting, they have enterprise level permitting and licensing. And the advantage of that is the biggest need on these things is for it to be tied into specific parcel information. Well, Tyler's already our provider for that. And the next thing on the list, Tyler payments should be up and running in May 2026. We're working with Tyler for payments, which means that when somebody goes to the website to pay their tax bill, they're looking at live data. When they make the payment, it's automatically updated.
So will that actually be in the works by May 15th when property taxes are due?
I'm really hoping that it's done before the due date.
So we need to see what the real cost is the way we're doing it now too, then, so we can make that comparison.
We need a solution that at the very least doesn't add more staff time to the process, and hopefully would reduce some of the staff time for the process in all these situations. It's challenging because when people look at software, we saw this with UKG, they always look at it and they evaluate it as, this is how we've always done it, how can the software do that? Instead of asking the question, what is it we really need to accomplish? And can we change the way we're doing it to work most efficiently with the tools that are available? There are things about the way counties do business, union contracts and extra pays and all the goofy things that make payroll a mess. Permitting, shoreland ordinances, other stuff. If we have driveway permits and we have a density limit and they can't have one within X amount of time. Well, if you want that to flag to say, you really have to have good GIS data to say the driveway is here, and I can't have another one on this parcel because the limit is the parcel is X amount of acres, can only have one driveway permit, or if it's this amount of acres, it could have more than one, but they have to be at least this far apart. How do you get all those rules into one system? It just gets to be a problem. So in a situation where they want everything to be automated and they'd like to have 25 years worth of history of permitting, where's that gonna come from? And in my thought, Tyler's a front runner in that way too, because if we take the history we have and we upload it to the parcel specific information, then it lives with our parcel data and not with our permit data. And it's searchable that way, and the permit data can always draw from the parcel for more information. But it's gonna be a process, and it's gonna require a pretty concerted effort to make a good decision. Our website host also has a permitting and licensing software. That's the thing that it does well, is it has a really good workflow that runs right through the website. And then it queries these other databases for information.
Deep Lake Park's gotta be part of that conversation, how
And,
that would
and,
work too.
and Catalyst has a campground function. So we don't want to staff that park. We want people to, just like that, there's nobody selling you a camping permit at Itasca Park. You're doing that all online before you get there. But on a daily basis, they're checking to see that the right people are in the right spots, right? So you need to have staff there on a daily basis, but you don't have anybody sitting in a window waiting for cars to drive through. We can't afford to do that. State Parks made that change a long time ago. So yes, that's permitting and licensing, and reservations is all kind of potentially thrown in the mix here. Just want to highlight the things that have happened, especially with housing, the Pinecrest Apartments, Heartland Heights, County Line Estates, and Fardin Township. I'm at next week's HRA meeting. There's that 80-acre parcel that we got that's split by the railroad line, and the half that's north, that's up on 500th Street in Fardin Township, that we never intended to put industrial development on, potentially light commercial development. We're going to ask the HRA board to parcel that out into 8 or 10 parcels and sell them as they are. That's the buffer between the residential area and the railroad track before we get into potentially any commercial real development. So
what will they be zoned?
they won't be zoned.
Well, I know they won't be zoned, but what's the use?
They're outside of shoreland, so the use is whatever. If somebody wants to build a house, they could build a house. If somebody wants to put up a big toy storage shed, if somebody wanted to buy 4 of them and put up a bunch of big toy storage sheds and rent them,
Okay,
whatever would be allowed on a 3 to 5 acre parcel outside of shoreland within the county. So there really wouldn't be a lot of restrictions, but I think that, and I talked to Tim Humphreys, and my plan is for us to take this to their meeting in May.
that was my next question.
So, and I had a conversation with him, and I talked with the people from WSN, and I just simply said, why don't we just sell these? Because that'll give us some money for more development or do something else. We never were really gonna put anything. If somebody wanted to put a plumbing shop in there, and they can run like home-based businesses. They couldn't really have a large employer there, but if somebody had a plumbing shop and they had 3 or 4 employees and their work was primarily not on the location, that's what they could do. I think they could get a CUP for storage facility that they would rent out to other people.
So does Fern have an ordinance?
Fardin does not have an ordinance. They do not have a zoning ordinance. So the plan is to generally introduce that. Well, I just introduced it now, but next week we're going to talk about what that process might look like. Then we're going to go to Fardin, and then we'll come back with the details of how we would parcel those out, and then how we would sell those. And probably in May, we'd ask for the board to set the date for a public hearing to actually sell those parcels, list the minimum price, and then in June, we would sell those parcels or make them available over the counter.
So Fern doesn't have a zoning ordinance, it can build anything.
Pardon, you mean?
Hmm?
Fardin?
Or Fardin, yeah.
Yes.
Which would make, if I was gonna buy one of those lots, I would be cautious and wait if I didn't have a business in mind, whether I wanted to put a house up, depending on what else goes
Mhm.
there.
I know some of the people have already contacted me that live across the road on the north side. They were wondering if they became available, if they would be able to buy.
Oh, yeah.
They could buy them, they could hold them, they could do nothing with them. We're not gonna put a development requirement on them,
Okay.
but we are very likely gonna sell them at market
Okay.
instead of at a reduced rate, because the reduced rate implies that they're gonna build a house on it, and that's gonna create tax capacity.
So has Barton ever considered adopting a zoning ordinance? I mean, with some of the growth that potentially could happen up there, they probably should be seriously thinking about it.
And like you say, what they've already got going, I mean, there's already in a sense an industrial area where you look at Potlatch and Pine Products and
Yeah.
Storley's and on and on. They're in that one area. And,
Yeah, they should, and the county's gonna be asked the question again, should we have countywide zoning? It's gonna come up, and it's gonna keep coming up until the answer is one day we have to do that because of requirements, but, as Eric and I talked this week, that's not the answer yet.
We need to solve the permitting thing first.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, because if we started enforcing the building code, we would need something very comprehensive.
And more staff.
Oh, gosh.
When you think about it, we're gonna go to, possibly go to county assessors too.
Yes, countywide assessing is gonna be we will be bringing an outline of the path towards that to personnel soon and general government soon. And our recommendation is probably to take action in the 27 year. Because it take 2 to 3 years to get somebody licensed to do that. And in 2 to 3 years, we're likely to lose two or three of our current local independent assessors.
So is that going back to eliminating the local assessors at the township level and then be a county employee that supervises all the other
The
assessors they hire?
The intermediate step would be that we would enforce countywide assessing and that we would continue to contract with the people who are able to do that and then fill in the spaces with county employees when we no longer have resources that are doing it privately.
What's driving that? There's not enough or assessors or?
The people that we have, there's not enough people who are registered, or who are licensed to do it, and the people who are licensed to do it have indicated they are not intending to renew their licenses past 27 or 28.
So my concern there is we're making a local township problem our problem.
There's a couple of different ways of looking at it. Townships are currently paying X number of dollars for those contracts. One scenario, they pay the county for that, and we use that to offset the cost of managing that program. And then many counties that do that don't charge for that, and it goes into the general levy instead of the local levies. That'll be a policy decision that'll be introduced for conversation this year and not decided today, not decided for 2027, maybe a consideration for 28 budget. But yeah, there's a lot of moving things. And we're almost moving too late on that one. We will probably have to look to hire somebody who's already licensed, which means we're gonna have to try to steal somebody from a county that has somebody who's licensed to do that.
We are one of the,
Obligated anyhow, because if the townships can't find anybody to
I
do
know
it,
they
it
have to
falls
hire.
on us
Yeah.
anyhow.
It is ultimately our responsibility if they don't. And I believe
That's where it's going, and
we're the
I
only
totally
one
get
that's
it.
not doing countywide zoning.
yeah, we are the only one that's not doing countywide assessing. More good news.
Yeah.
And I highlight this one because it hasn't been resolved. Talking about tourism marketing.
Yeah, I was kind of chuckling when I read this. When I
Just-
got here.
We're not gonna talk about that now.
I have one comment going back to the development, because Tom and I are on the personnel committee, and we just encouraged to start out for staff development, to start out easy, not something so hugely complex.
Right.
So the other, yes, and I think that the bites that Mary is talking about are things that she feels she can manage and has experience with, and will provide us some background and provide with some opportunity to put some new things into the culture. Generally then, this would be a time where we would refresh this, but with this construction project going on, and with this being an election year, I'm gonna suggest that we push this out. The element on, I think one of the elements, county board, department head communication styles training, we just haven't done that. I wanna push it out till this time next year, when we know who our board is gonna be for the next 2 years. What I do wanna do, and I think we talked about at the personnel committee meeting, is do a little, after the June work session, bring the department heads in and just have a leadership meeting and just kind of review. It's gonna be a really good time to bring up some of these tough conversations about budget. It's gonna be a good time to talk about some of these other things in a group setting, so everybody can hear your perspective relative to that, primarily before we go into budget season, but also you to hear from them about the challenges they've been facing. We haven't had the whole group together since '21. So that would be the plan, would be to have a longer work session in June, have lunch brought in and take a few hours with the whole group and do that, and then plan for leadership training in '27, kicking off into another iteration of strategic planning. But when Jamie asked me about this and she said, can we run through this? I said, yeah, and then I looked at it, well, we've done that and that, and these things we have to determine if they're still a priority or not. We're at a point where it's time to do it again. It's just not reasonable to try to do it again until this project is done.
I just thought of this as Jeff was talking, because I read this last week. So in Minnesota, the average age, I can't remember what year it was, to buy a home was 32, and it's gone up to age 40. Not only because houses have increased, but because people can't afford the property tax. So in thinking about our budget and all these difficult decisions, the goal isn't to tack on a bunch of percentages in the levy. So I don't know what that looks like, but it's gonna require a lot of thought.
Do we want to be the lowest cost housing county in the state? There's another point to that too.
That wasn't my point. My point wasn't even that, Jeff.
It was a counterpoint to that, because we are one of the lower cost housing counties in the state.
And this article is for the state of Minnesota as a whole.
Yep. Yeah, the average home price is over $300,000. I don't know how people coming 18 to 20 to 30 years old can even think about that. I don't know how they would.
You know, I actually really appreciate these discussions, because I do think, seeing over the time I've been on the board, and most of us have been on the board, I think you can start to see that the decisions we make in strategic planning and that do have a direct impact on the communities in our county and the direction we go. That question just kind of hits the point exactly. Who's having those discussions? We are, basically, and some of our organizations we work with are having those discussions. And it is kind of driving the direction that we're going, which it should. And I'm not so sure those discussions and details occurred, a decade ago. And it's good, because you know what you want to be when you grow up then. And you purposely are trying to achieve the things you're planning. Good.
So those are those items. If I had 2 more items I would bring to everybody's attention, is that we got our draft financial reports on the 2024 audit about a week ago. It was tough working through for a couple of reasons. 24 was still kind of a mess. 24 audits from the nursing home and from HRA were delayed because there were changes in staffing and changes in how that was getting done. It very nearly got to the point where it was gonna affect our bond rating as a county because it wasn't done. It's supposed to be done by the end of September. It's supposed to be done 9 months after the end of the year close. The good news is Mary already has the audit firm out of Bemidji engaged for HRA working on 2025. I think they're starting in May. And we have to work with the nursing home. The nursing home should be able to, their year end is September 30th, so they're done 3 months before we are. There's no reason they can't be done. And we really need these from those component units by the end of July, early August, so that they don't affect the county's timeline for getting that work done. Our internal accounting system for 25 is much tighter than it has been. As a result of the changes that we made in that office, we're gonna be in much better shape that way. But we were right up against it. The bond rating agency is saying if we don't at least have draft financials, we're gonna have to recommend a credit rating change. Might not have a significant impact, but it would the next time we had to go issue debt. And I don't have that on the list for 8 to 10 years. And we're in good shape because of that with the capital plan, which we have our public hearing and we'll have the approval of the 5-year plan next week. So I just wanted you to know that that was the case. And then I wanted to provide just a little scope on a couple of the CIP projects that we're gonna see on that, but I already talked about the Farden, so I don't have to talk about that we're planning on selling, recommending selling those 8 to 10 parcels. Deep Lake Park, I think we've talked about a couple of times, but Environmental Services was out this week and actually staked off the setback from the lake. So Corey and Stuart Crosby and I are gonna go down there Thursday and actually place where we have the road, the parking, and the picnic shelter related to those setbacks. And what we haven't placed is we haven't placed the visitor center. So we wanna take a look at where that ought to be placed relative to the setbacks and the road and the parking. And I think it's likely that we may actually adjust the parking a little bit, east or west, to accommodate for one or both of those buildings. But if we do it before they start construction, I'm pretty sure Gordon's will just swap us time and materials. As long as it's not that they're moving more or creating or doing more area, I don't think it's gonna change the way that they're. And if they say there's gonna be a big change order for that, then we'll just have them do it the way we do it and we'll work around that, we'll plan around that. But I don't think Gordon's is gonna do that.
Is the visitor center gonna have restrooms?
Yes.
And then they're just gonna have a little kiosk center for information, or how large is this building gonna be?
So in conversation with the Parks Board, we've talked about a building that can hold 50 to 75 people. So we're looking at about 1,000 square feet for a main building that would have restrooms, a small kitchenette, and then some storage. So on the first iteration, I'm showing like a 40 by 70 foot building. And I'm thinking that this is kind of an improved post frame construction building where you have in-floor heat and you do it as cost effectively as you can, but you make it nice. Some of the details on the front would match some of the details from the old historic buildings, right? Some of the trim features that we had.
And why would you put in a kitchenette?
So that you can rent that thing out for birthday and at parties and other things like that. Basically what you would have is you would have water and service and maybe refrigerator, freezers. You wouldn't have, I don't think you'd put cooking equipment in there.
So then, the parks or the NRM staff would make sure that it was cleaned up, et cetera, every day?
I already see people coming in and using the sink to wash their dishes and that are camping.
Yeah.
Should we be considering?
Well, you would secure that so that it's only available if people are paying a rental fee.
Oh, okay,
for
so you're gonna
that.
have it locked off?
So you would have roll-down windows and the kitchen wouldn't be available
Okay,
from the visitor center unless there was a function or somebody were paying for it.
okay, I was envisioning just one big room, okay.
No.
That makes
Should
sense.
we be considering it serving purpose as a storm shelter too?
I was
Yeah.
wondering about that too.
Because I mean, there's possible grants probably for.
Yeah, potentially.
Separate grants potentially for that if it was a brick building.
That was I had lunch at Third Street Market last week, and Tom Peterson was there.
Yep.
And he's very open to donating artifacts of the
Mhm.
former Belton.
Oh, from his family.
Yeah, and also at the same time, he was originally resistant to the use of the name Valentine, but now he's more open to it. Is there any way you can use that name? Or the lake, or even the park itself?
We can have the conversation. The park's already been named.
Or name the visitor center.
You could name the visitor center, you could, I,
Good idea, maybe.
there's a lot of,
Picnic Shelter.
yeah, there's a lot of different things that can be done.
Trail.
Yeah, but at first he was very resistant to it, he didn't want the name to be used, but he totally changed his mind. Well,
Be a great way to remember history.
yeah,
You know, the old sign, which I wasn't here for, the old sign 60 years ago or 50 years ago that was out by the roadside, I would love to incorporate that design for the sign outside of the park. You know, and it would say Deep Lake Park, and it even could say at Val Chatel down on the bottom, and not really change anything. So there's a lot of, and then the front entrance of the lodge was pretty significant. And then the interior scalloping around the bars and the areas like that is a detail that could be done. I do not envision a $5 million visitor center. I envision an $800,000 visitor center based on construction types. So we'll have to manage that appropriately.
I was just thinking, when you say that, read an article just yesterday, and I can't remember where it was, but it was $1 million restaurant. And I was thinking,
Yeah.
we don't need to be known for something like that.
What was the one in Akeley, 175?
Roughly, yeah.
So if we do use the name, it would be nice then to have some sort of a kiosk with history and some photos.
I expect that the visitor center would have some of the historical and local flavor in it, whether it's, you know, bulletin boards or display cases or, and then to provide one of the functions, I show that 30 by 30 or 30 by 40 space, the bathrooms and the kitchen in the middle, and then a smaller space, 20 by 40, which would be a smaller meeting room, and the back side of it would be storage for cross-country ski equipment and/or, you know, custodial equipment. It depends on how things get built. The cost of renovating the existing maintenance building is probably going to be prohibitive. It will probably be cheaper to build a post-frame building and put the bath and shower house for the lower campground in that building. I'm looking at trying to get these services and these facilities built as economically as possible. And if you put the shower houses and the restrooms in the maintenance building, well, you solve the problem of needing to have water in your maintenance building. If you got a wet wall in this little chunk of the building, and then you've got water in this part of the building. So we're gonna walk through and we're gonna try to identify where those things should be, because both of those are then on phase 2 grant application. And we need to know where they are so that we can scope the roads that need to be improved in order to get to them. Because everything out there is just sand.
How fun to think about.
It really is, it is a lot of fun to look at this. The ICS met with the 4 departments scoping program relative to the old jail, just to come up with ideas. So they met with probation, courts, law enforcement, and attorney's office. I also had a meeting and included conversation with Mike from Human Services, because if one possible project is an infill between here, then everybody that touches that and everybody who has clientele and services who would use that space should be involved. And not including human services in the first conversation was a mistake. So I asked them if we could just get a survey for them to fill out, and we'll follow up with questions on that.
When we were at the leadership conference.
Yeah.
I can't remember what county I talked to, they brought probation in-house under the county, and they were saving $200,000 a year. But didn't we look at that, and it was actually higher? It cost us more to bring it in-house than it did to hire.
Cass County's bringing it in-house, and it's gonna cost them $600,000 to $800,000 more.
Yeah, I was really surprised. I wish I could remember which county it was.
We can't do what we're doing for what we're paying for
Yeah, I didn't think
county
so.
probation at this point. I know a lot of people, there's kind of a push for counties to take that over. And I just don't see that being something we could do right now. Because it would be, they have 6 probation officers down there. And we don't pay for 6 probation officers.
No.
And then a supervisor and.
The modeling was great for we were DOC model.
Yeah, that's, yeah, I forgot about that, yeah.
Yeah, there have been some changes in the reimbursement rates, but actually our budget has not really changed over the past couple of years relative to that and the services that they're providing.
So the other thing is with Nemeth looking for a new year-round place, that building could come into play for us for something.
I asked 5 years ago if the current use of that building was the first best use of that building, and I don't think that it is. But I have said if we look long range, I would love to be able to come to the backside of that building with handicap accessible spaces, and that gives us options. Even if the option is that now we have a year-round handicap accessible historical museum. The Nemeth is, if they weren't there, the historical museum would go, we're just gonna expand a floor. We have to be careful about that. They did just sign a 5-year lease again last year. So they are there for, they've been there for one of their 5-year. There's nothing we would do in that amount of time.
It would take us that long to figure something out,
But
probably.
in 10 years, we might have a different plan. So, we need to have this plan down and just kind of off to the side to know what the priorities are and what the future funding opportunities are, before we can do that. And then the last one related to the transit project is that there's an empty lot. In order to put the transit building on as it's designed, we're gonna need to go to the city for a variance on the setback from the front street, which probably wouldn't be difficult, and it might still be the best thing to do, but one consideration is there's an empty lot to the east. And to determine if the county were interested in ever making an offer on that lot. The value of the parcels in Farden, the value of that lot in town. I contacted Eric Wolf yesterday, and he is working on putting together pricing and ideas for me so that I would know what that might look like. I don't even know if we want to pursue that because of the way the lots are abutted. Moving east doesn't fix us, but if we have that lot, then our setback to that side is good, right? We could go right up to the existing lot line and still be fine. So there's the possibility of that. Otherwise, that is what I had, and I do have a couple of items for the general government group.
Anybody have anything else? Move to adjourn?
I'll second.
All in favor?
All right.
All right, we're adjourned.